Thank you everybody for joining this evening. This is the first of a series of workshops focusing on different sectors of IAGRE's membership. We intend to hold another one of these in spring for students, and it's meant to be an interactive session, so please feel free to post any comments or questions in the chat box. So Sarah's put everybody on mute, which is the best thing to do. And then what we'll do as we go through, if you fill in the chat function, I can sort of field questions and open up as we need to. So you'll know from the media, and IAgrE regularly reminds its members that agriculture continues to have the worst fatal incident rate compared to other sectors. So I'll say that again, we kill more people in agriculture than any other industry in the UK. So not a good statistic. Most of these accidents are considered avoidable. And the HSE and the Farm Safety Partnership has called upon all organisations in the industry to increase their effort to reduce the incidence of deaths, injuries and ill health in farming. The Farm Safety Partnerships set a challenging target to reduce deaths by 50% by 2023. So everybody's interested in how we can do more to resolve this. So IAgrE is signed up to the Farm Safety Partnership in England, and we also endorse the work of other national farm safety organisations around the UK, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, etc. Our individual members are in a position to influence farmers directly through education, manufacturers in designing and developing and producing machines, equipment and facilities, livestock handling, etc., and through the dealer network, specifying, supplying and installing and maintaining equipment. Also through the farming and food supply chains, the growing, rearing, harvesting, processing, etc. And in many safety critical roles, such as managers, engineers, technicians through the industry. So we're very much about having feet on the ground and working at grassroots level, literally. And we have many farmer members who are active in branches. So for the first 40 minutes, we'll have 3 short presentations followed by a Q&A session. And then we can have a sort of open workshop really to discuss all the different aspects. So we want to hear your thoughts about what we can do for you and what we can do better. So we did have 3 guest speakers. Our first guest speaker is Tom Price, NFU Policy Advisor and Farm Safety Partnership Secretary. And he'll provide some context and highlight topics we need to focus on. We did have Stephanie Barclay, Farm Safety, FSF, a charity funded by the NFU Mutual, who devised and delivers the yellow wellies. Now, unfortunately, she's poorly, so that's going to be shared out between Tom and Alan. And then our third speaker is Alan, who many of you will know, long-standing IAgrE member, very much our go-to health and safety advisor, 32 years in health and safety. So the agenda you see on the screen will run through, and really the aims and objectives is to identify ways that lecturers and trainers, together with us and the members, can reduce deaths and injuries in agriculture, support the Farm Safety Partnership and achieve this target reduction. So we want to raise awareness of farm safety concerns and messages and share good practice and effective methods of communication, education and training, and increase entries into IAgrE's annual student safety competition. Okay, so at that point, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Tom.
Hi, just bear with me a moment and I'll just share my screen. Which seems to have frozen. Let me try a different route.
Perhaps try unsharing and going back in. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, it's not behaving itself, I'm sorry to say. Okay, I'll just admit that technology has defeated me for this evening. And
do you want me to share your slides?
If you've got them, yeah.
I have. Right.
Excellent, thank you. Good evening. My name is Tom Price, and I work for the NFU as a Farm Safety and Transport Policy Advisor. And a large proportion of my time is spent communicating with our members to try and raise awareness about safety issues and to promote practice to try and improve the safety performance, not just with our members, but in the wider agricultural community. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be with you this evening. Next slide, please. I was going to start off with some headline statistics to try and put things into context. I think Charlie at the start of the talk mentioned that agriculture has the worst safety or the poorest safety record of any major industry in the UK, and that is very correct. On average, there are 30 fatal injuries per year, and that works out at about 18 times the all industry average. But as well as having a high fatal injury rate, there's also a high rate of non-fatal injuries, which works out at about double the national average. And also there's a high number of work-related ill health cases, which is slightly higher than the national average. Now, last year's performance in terms of fatal accidents was actually exceptional, and it was the lowest number ever recorded at 20 worker fatalities within agriculture. But in my opinion, the fundamentals had not actually changed at all. And although this Farm Safety Partnership has set itself a target of reducing injuries by 50% within 5 years, unfortunately, the very good performance last year, in my mind, couldn't be taken as an indication that it was job done. And I think that is because there's a lack of evidence to show that the fundamentals had basically changed. And that situation, that my belief has actually been confirmed in what's been happening in the current year, where so far there's been 34 fatal incidents reported in the year to date. Next slide, please. Every injury has a cost. If there's an injury, there's the potential for a huge emotional cost, but also there is a financial cost, and that financial cost has to be borne by somebody, and it's borne by the people who run agricultural businesses. And the HSE estimate that last year the cost of injury and ill health in agriculture worked out at around about £274 million. Now that's a cost which is spread across both industry and also costs associated with government, for example, benefit claimants. So I think in terms of safety, there's a very strong moral case that the situation in agriculture needs to be improved, but also there's a very strong financial case as well. Next slide, please. The causes of fatal and non-fatal injuries in agriculture don't change. They haven't changed over the last 5, 10, you can go back probably 20 years and they won't have changed. And it's the same things which come up. And it's incidents, things involving farm transport, contact with livestock, falls from height, contact with machinery, and contact with electricity. As well as the causes of fatal injury being very well known, the solutions are very well known as well. And there's a very strong case to argue that with some relatively easy changes to attitudes and behaviours within people working in agriculture, the situation can be massively improved, can be turned around very quickly. The potential is there, but it needs people to change their attitudes, and that's the difficult thing. An example would be with regard to transport. Every year, farmers and farm workers are run over by their own vehicles because they don't secure them before they get out. Basically, they don't put the brake on before they walk in front of it. And now there's all sorts of reasons why somebody would want to leave a vehicle without securing it properly to save a few seconds. It's a bit of a hassle, to turn everything off and on again. But is that time saved or job made easier? Is that worth the risk that you could actually lose your life? And if everybody just made sure that they secured their vehicle every time they left, that would make quite a dramatic improvement to the safety figures and could reduce fatal incidents by a sum of 20% or in that region. So there is lots of potential to improve the safety record of agriculture, but it's not necessarily easy to turn that into positive actions. Next slide, please. One thing which is of interest to me, as well as accidents on farm, as part of my responsibility with regard to transport, is to try and promote awareness and best practice when it comes to the use of the road network. And it may be counterintuitive, but it is the situation that rural roads, in terms of accident statistics, especially in terms of fatal injuries, they are more risky than urban roads. And the figures you can see on the slide show that there were 900, almost 1,000 fatalities last year on rural roads compared to 650 on urban roads. And another thing which might be particularly of interest to people who are involved in education is that young drivers, in proportion to their total numbers as part of the driving population, figure quite prominently in accidents. And in last year, there were 1 in 8 of accidents involved drivers aged 17 to 19. And also, what is certainly surprising to me is that when it comes to looking at contributory factors to accidents, it's not necessarily going too fast or losing control of a car. It's failure to look properly, to be aware of what's happening on the road around you, and to just have that awareness of your situation when you're driving. Next slide, please. The NFU, we're one organisation. We represent around about 55,000 farming members in the UK, but we are not the only organisation. And we don't work alone when it comes to try and change behaviours and to try and promote an improvement to the safety record. And we are part of an organisation called the Farm Safety Partnership. And that's an umbrella organisation of stakeholders who've got a shared common aim. And that aim is to improve the safety record of agriculture. And the main mechanism to do that is to try and coordinate messaging to increase its impact and reach within the farming community. And the partnership as a whole has decided to concentrate on 4 key themes which tackle 4 of the main causes of fatal injury in agriculture. And they are transport, managing livestock, managing children in the farm environment, and working at height. Next slide, please. And starting in January next year, the sort of highlight or the focus of campaign activity for the Farm Safety Partnership will be around transport, with some messages which, if picked up and behaviours are changed, could have quite a significant impact on the industry safety performance. The first of those messages is to follow the safe stop procedure. It's just, I was talking a few minutes ago, it's about securing a vehicle before you leave it, to make sure that you're not run over by your own vehicle. Next slide, please. The next message is to wear a seatbelt. It's compulsory to wear a seatbelt on any road journey, and for a very good reason. It's because the seatbelt prevents and limits injury in the event of a collision or a vehicle overturn. And the benefit of wearing a seatbelt is just the same off the road in a farmyard or field environment as well. And accidents, lives, and injuries can be saved if seatbelts are adopted and worn on all journeys. Next slide, please. The other, which is a common sense action, is to make sure that vehicles are legal and safe to drive every time. And it's to make sure that the basics are working. So it's things like lights, brakes, mirrors, and making sure that loads are secure. And this involves getting farmers just to change their behaviours and check their vehicles before they start their working day. Next slide, please. And lastly, is to take steps to make a farmyard a safer environment. And some suggested actions are to put in traffic routes, segregate vehicles and pedestrians, have enhanced lighting, and wear high vis. Next slide, please. Following on from a focus on transport, the focus in the second quarter will be on livestock, and the messages there are to use good handling facilities, be really cautious when entering a cattle enclosure, and always have an escape route. Remove aggressive farm animals from the herd. Next slide, please. And wherever possible, separate livestock from the public, and if possible, use fields without rights of way, especially when cattle have calves at foot. Next slide, please. In quarter three, the campaign will focus on children, and I think the message here is around about making sure that children are supervised, that they are supervised by an adult that's not engaged in work activities, and to be aware that farms can be very attractive places for children, but can also be very hazardous places. Next slide, please. And also to emphasize the fact that the law specifically prohibits any child under the age of 13 from either riding or driving any sort of agricultural machine. Now, this is actually something which is a very contentious topic with our members. Many of our members push back on this and say that, well, you know, I was brought up on a farm. I was using agricultural vehicles from a very early age. Why should that change? And the answer is really very simple. It's because every year a child is killed, and in many cases they lose their life around a farm vehicle. It is common for children to fall out of farm vehicles, basically, and to be run over. So that is the message why that's the reason why we're trying to promote that message. Thank you. Next slide, please. And lastly, for quarter four, it's the focus on working at height, and I think the messages are there to first of all avoid roof work if it is at all possible. If you can do the work from the ground, do that. If you can build in systems so that you don't need to get up at height, that's something to really give serious thought to if you're doing any sort of new build. Use a professional contractor because they're going to have the skills and the knowledge and the equipment to do a job safely. Next slide, please. And if you do need to go up in height, use the right equipment, and really avoid using something which is cobbled together. You know, for example, a bit of a platform using a pallet on a forklift truck. Next slide, please. Next slide. Go on, please. Next one. The HSE have carried out research to try and help them better target farmers with messaging and to help them try and find better ways to change behaviours. Because with the best will in the world, as a regulator, they are not going to be able to visit every farm. They are not going to be able to enforce best practice and changes of behaviour on the industry. The best way to make change is to bring people along with you. Is to educate. So what they've done is that they've conducted some research to try and help them understand the best way to communicate to farmers. And as part of that research, they ended up splitting farmers into four groups or segments, and you can see those segments on the screen in front of you. And where they're focusing their activity is on the last two segments, the risk takers and the unclears. Next slide, please. And so what they're doing is that they are actually using the insights that they've got from this research to frame the way that they talk to farmers, and they're addressing their communications now in ways which they think are going to appeal most to risk takers and to people who fall into an unclear group. The way that those messages are framed, they will still hit and have an impact on planners and pragmatists, because although those two groups have relatively good performances, there's room for improvement. And you can see that the way that the language the HSE is using is changing. And if you look at one of the publications called "What a Good Farm Looks Like," they've adapted a more direct, trying to encourage and help people do the right thing rather than necessarily wave a big stick at people. And it's this research is being combined also with more proactive activity in terms of educational activity through ACE events, which are, I suppose, an equivalent of the old SHAD events, but it's very much getting farmers together to tell them what, as the enforcer, what the expectations that the HSE has, and then they are going out and following this up with some inspection activity to see whether or not the messages that they've presented to farmers at these face-to-face events are actually landed home, or they will be doing when the COVID situation changes and people can get back to a more normal life. So to conclude, what are we asking people to do? How can we all try and improve the safety performance within agriculture? I think there's a few things. My first ask would be to have a change in the language that's used. Very often the discussion is around accidents in agriculture. I think accidents is the wrong word. I think Charlie hit on it at the start when he said that events are avoidable. I think most accidents, or sorry, most injuries in agriculture are avoidable, and better language is incidence, because I think if you use the word accident, it sort of almost implies that something's inevitable. So that's the first thing we could do. We can start talking about incidents, but also we can all start highlighting best practice. And my ask to you would be to pick up on the messages which are coming out from the Farm Safety Partnership, because they are quite concise messages which tackle some of the major causes, and if put into effect could have a big impact on the safety statistics. And that's my bit concluded. Thank you. And thank you, Charlie, for the slides.
No problem. It's okay. Okay, so we're going over to Alan now.
Let me share my screen. Get the right one. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. That isn't me. Minimize this. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, as Charlie mentioned, Stephanie's not well. In fact, she's in hospital at the moment. Not COVID related, fortunately, but she's having some difficulties with her breathing due to asthma, really. But we've put some slides together and hopefully we can update you all really on the work of the Farm Safety Foundation, which Stephanie is the manager of, and the Yellow Wellies campaign. And hopefully those of you who are working in colleges and universities will be aware that they have been visiting colleges to get at the students for some time. So yeah, she's getting a bit of care there. She needs it at the moment, sadly. Is the slides working okay, Charlie? I'm on full screen at the moment.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. So the Farm Safety Foundation, it was the NFU Mutual, set that up as a charity to raise awareness, really targeting younger people below 40. I don't know how many people in this audience want to be or wish they were still in that category, but it was to look at both the physical and mental well-being, and I'll touch on that in a minute, in terms of the next generation of farmers. But this is the key. It was to educate them, but to inspire them to challenge and change the risk-taking behaviours, because we've got this innate ability in the industry. I think my ex-boss in HSE used to describe the industry as unwise risk takers. So yeah, what can the younger generation do? Yellow Wellies Farm Safety Foundation worked through 4 work streams, really, through training, obviously farmers through colleges and universities, and through the Young Farmers Club network, UK-wide. Engagement, building those relationships and developing the networks, and when there were such things as shows and events and people could meet through those, and collaborating, communicating very effectively. And I will remind people of the various campaigns that they've carried out, and research as well. And I think this is key. We've got this bold, challenging target to reduce fatalities by 50%, but there's other measures, and that's the problem. As Tom said, the figure last year was its lowest, and then suddenly we shot back up again, and it's sort of these blips. So relying on relatively few fatals. I mean, we used to say it was 1 a week, at least it isn't that now. But to be able to look at other messages, other metrics, how is the industry picking up their messages? How easy is it? Where do they get their information from? And that's very much what this evening's session is about. So Yellow Wellies, if I could call it that, has a number of successes. I mean, the farm safety trainings embedded in education, they've now actually delivered the training to over 10,000 students and young farmers through the universities and the Young Farmers Clubs. There is good collaboration, and we see that with Farm Safety Week as well, and there's high awareness and increasing. The figures on the slide here, there's a lot of information, and these slides will be available after the session. But yeah, just to pick up on the key things, that last evaluation that I have from a previous presentation by Stephanie, 2017, and we know it's been increasing in the last couple of years. High engagement as well. If a measure of success is how many followers they've got, 16,000 followers on social media. So with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, 11,000 on their email address list. That's quite some address list, I would suggest. the key thing is it having an impact? Okay, I've thrown doubt on fatalities as being a measure, but certainly it was significant reduction in that age group 16 to 40 over those few years between 2014 and 18. I haven't got the figures to hand subsequently. I think the other key thing we must remember, and there's been a lot more interest in the last couple of years, and this is about farmers' health and well-being. We all know about the challenges that farmers face: lone working, long hours, weather, finance, and all these other things. We won't get onto the B word, but these all impact how stress affects individuals. And I think we mustn't forget that I think the figure is still around one person a week involved with farming commits suicide. Now that's more than are killed in safety related accidents, if you like. So we mustn't forget that. So a lot of effort is being given through the Mind Your Head campaign with various events and information, trying to overcome this very high incident. At least 1 in 6 actually admit to experiencing mental health issues, but the reality is probably much higher than that. But at least farmers are now starting to talk about it. That's the key thing. And Tom mentioned how much safety-related incidents, fatalities cause the industry. Well, again, when you look at the 35 billion a year cost the UK economy and working days lost, it's absolutely huge. And this is sort of the soft side of safety and health. So communicating the Mind Your Head campaign, there's a lot of work been going on there. They've incorporated well-being into the induction to farm safety training for students. There's information available. Go to help. You will have seen all of this in Twitter and the publications, so I don't need to dwell on that. I just will flag up there the stress management leaflet published by the University of Aberdeen, at NTS Ag, that's non-technical skills in agriculture group up at Aberdeen University. Dr. Amy Irwin's on the call tonight. And they've been producing a lot of really good information on fatigue management, stress management, situational awareness, tractor safety, etc., etc. So these are resources we need to get out much wider for those who aren't aware of it. And that will be a question we'll come back to in the workshop. Are you aware of some of this material? But anyway, coming back to the Farm Safety Foundation, Yellow Welly's little book of Mind in Your Head, that was a publication. I'm not sure hard copies are available now, but it's available online. So the communication has been around the 4 themes, as Tom outlined just now. Farm Safety Week is that, traditionally in July, that big campaign where everybody gets together. And it isn't only Farm Safety Partnership England, there are separate partnerships in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and in the Republic of Ireland. And those general themes and messages have been agreed with everybody to promote the same issues on a daily basis to get focus. Traditionally, we've shown the consequences, what happens when it goes wrong, but the new focus really has been around what the audience wants to hear, because it can get hardened to that, and that's what's behind HSE's research about how individuals perceive those messages, their attitudes towards risk. And the feeling and the approach being adopted is giving positive messages, the benefits to business, and HSE certainly agrees with that as well, positive outcomes. And I think that's been relevant with the COVID outbreak as well, with those that are, if you like, doing it right, at least have been able to carry on their business in packing lines and so on. So the aim as well was to highlight those risks to older as well as younger farmers, and that again we mustn't forget. Half of farmers killed are over 60, and a third of them, well, they wouldn't be working in any other industry. And we all know Dad, Granddad just never wants to give up and still wants to walk around the yard, and they're the ones that get run over, can't hear so well, can't get out of the way, whatever. So how can we communicate effectively with these various groups? This is an analysis that Yellow Wellies did, which is direct in their approach, and wearing my other professional body's hat, IOSH, the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, Rural Industries Group, we ran an event last year on how can we communicate more effectively, and there's a few people in the audience tonight that took part in that. There were a lot of lessons learned, and some of those are still to be applied, but this was Yellowelly's presentation and take on it, that a lot of campaigns fail with this one-size-fits-all policy, and that's been the case for regulators and so on, produce a guidance book, whether it's farm wise or individual leaflets, whatever it might be, a film. And the problem is a lot of people perhaps wouldn't bother to look at that. Others will, don't need to look at it because they understand it. They're already ahead of the game. So we need to adopt these basically 4 different approaches according to HSE's research. So if the person reading that message, if it doesn't hit their button, as it were, then their particular needs or interests or what problems they face, it just gets lost in the background noise of all the other publicity going on and other things that you can focus on or need to work on. So we have to think about who we're targeting, what they need to hear most importantly, and how they want to receive the information, creating a targeted campaign to make people take notice. Now, those of you are lecturers and trainers, you know that you pretty soon pick up, your whether it's your group of students or experienced farmers, the ones in the audience. Some are less receptive than others. You have ways to involve them and bring them out of themselves and take part in the discussion, and that's really where we're coming from. It's about in the broader approaches as well to publicity, to be able to communicate the messages more effectively. And using the right words and phrases, and heavens, that's very relevant to the young too. So making sure the language is right based on, I don't know how many people look on Instagram or all these other social media around, but it's something that we're all trying to get to grips with. Promoting information, guidance and stories that resonate and presenting next steps. I think that's the key as well. Taking people through, I hate the expression taking through a journey, but there's something next following up that they can actively do, get some sort of commitment. We did say in the flyer for this event about using VR. Now, personally, I haven't had the opportunity. If anybody has, then please talk about it during the workshop session. But Yellowelly's said that they've given their introduction to farm safety to over 10,000 students in the last 5 years now, and that's more of a current figure earlier this year. But they managed to get some money out of the National Lottery together with NFU Neutral sponsorship and developed a VR system. So the benefit of that is using virtual reality or augmented reality. It progresses training to the next level. Manufacturers are now using this as well. So I don't know how many colleges have got these facilities. We'd certainly be interested to hear that. But its benefits, it's safe and immersive learning environment. The individuals get more out of it without leaving the classroom, so reduces the risk, and the sessions are more active, memorable. It's leading edge, so it challenges the assumption of another health and safety lecture. It doesn't have to be boring. Make it lively and involved, and reduces the cost as well. We mustn't forget about, so and makes it safer in your hazardous surroundings. In a busy farmyard, the last thing you want is a bunch of people not really looking at what's going on around them whilst you're trying to train them. And the approach has been nudge theory. That's the word. We can't force real behavioural change. Using enforcement and punishment. I joined HSE as an inspector in 1979, enforcing legislation that was made in the mid-50s to 1962, and here we are 60 years later. We're still killing people in the same ways that those regulations, now gone, but those regulations were intended to stop. And that was a frustration to me in my, Charlie said, 32, 33 years in HSE, but I've been doing it for 45 years now. Nothing has changed really in how we kill people, and so it is about changing the behaviour. It's about knowing how people think. Can we make it easier for them to choose what's best for them and their families, and appealing to their nature and so on. Working together, it's about nudging everybody, and the strap line, your health, your safety, your choice. So that's the lesson endeth. On behalf of Stephanie, we'll take questions in the next session. I aim to finish my presentation by 8, and then we'll have half an hour for the wash up. Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. So putting my own hat back on now, and on behalf of the Institution of Agriculture Engineers, I joined the institution when I was a student at Silsoe College, just down the road here in Mid-Bedfordshire. In 1974-75, I was there. I've been a member ever since, and involved at all levels, student graduate representative on council and local branches and so on. And I know the benefit of meeting others face to face. We've been doing it. We had an excellent meeting last night by Zoom, our local branch, South East Midlands, and very effective it was. But that actually being able to get other people involved, and that's what I've always been keen, is to encourage collaboration. And wearing my hat I left HSE in 2011, but I've represented the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health on the board of the Farm Safety Partnership, and was very keen to get IAgrE involved, and we did, with Andy and others, Alistair at the time as CEO, and through that support, the institution joined the Partnership for England in 2013. We're active in the Transport and Machinery Working Group that I chaired, and held a conference ahead of this, really, at Harper Adams, a joint event on agriculture, engineering and compliance. It was a thorn in the side, or competitive advantage. It was meant to be a provocative title. Opportunities, threats, etc., etc. And then in October that year, the Transport and Machinery Group, we arranged that meeting with a good bunch of people. I think, Charlie, you said you recognise yourself amongst that group. With the Farm Safety Partnership at Tom's office there at Stoneleigh on the showground, and we had the launch of Safe Stop there, and there were about 70 people in total that attended that, and that included college staff, lecturers, right through the whole supply chain, farmers too, engineers, the AEA, and we had a lot of speakers, and laid out a roadmap really of all the things that we needed to talk about, and we could still go back to that now. But one of those things was, what can the Institution of Agriculture Engineers do? And we put together a report on the role of agriculture engineers, and that was published in our quarterly journal, Landwards, back in spring 2014. It's available on the website. Winding right through to current day, obviously, in the interim, we've had lots of branch meetings around the country that either touch on safety or specifically on safety topics. And a lot of those get written up briefly in the Landwards Journal. But I think one thing perhaps we don't do as an institution well is share the learning points from some of those as well as we could. So something to pick up in the workshop session. Very recently, we were invited to take part in the all-party parliamentary group on working at height in rural locations. And I think that was the first time the group had reached out. I think from Jane Gurney from Till Your Tractor is involved with one on transport, but this was the first one I was aware of, working at height in rural locations, and a useful session that was. It was to get that collaboration, that conversation going between those responsible, in terms of farming, those designing buildings, erecting buildings, and particularly dismantling them as well. So that conversation we need to collaborate to get the messages better. One area that we targeted, as well as the yellow wellies, identifying the young, and the institution is very much about encouraging young people to develop their careers in the industry. But in 2014, we set up a student project competition, and we introduced a subset, a subcategory for that one, specifically for projects related to safety. So this was to encourage and recognise innovation in safe design or operation of equipment or processes. So it hasn't just necessarily got to be hardware, but for students related, involved in agriculture engineering or subjects related to that. We're a very broad church in the Institution of Agriculture Engineers, and covers, other aspects of the industry. Our session last night was on agriculture, for example, aquaponics and so on. So there's a lot of opportunities there for colleges, for lecturers, university lecturers, to perhaps sow ideas to their students. We contemplated having students on here tonight, but we actually thought it'd be better to focus on lecturers, instructors, and trainers first to get your thoughts, and then, as Charlie said, we'll focus on another session for students in the spring. But a lot of this is about there's so much potential out there, and wearing my other hat as secretary of the Douglas Bomford Trust, we fund a lot of students who actually don't necessarily think of themselves as agriculture engineers, but they're involved in projects very much related to developing the things that we're talking about here to make the environment better, safer, sustainability, and all of those things. So what's interesting is the number of health and safety problems that students have identified themselves, whether it's working at home on the farm or as part of their work experience, and they've come up with engineering solutions. So the next couple of slides are just a couple of examples. In fact, the awards panel met today, but we can't announce who the winner was until we do that officially. But at least it will be awarded this year, I think. So anyway, last year, 2019, Kevin Shuttleworth, nothing to do with our local college, but up at Central Lancs, on operator, a vibration, really, whole body vibrations. This was looking at acceleration, effects on the body caused by tractor cab suspension. There was an overall project award that was also relevant that year. So as you can see, their best final year project, and went to Owen Morgan at Colleague Cigar, and they've been very good at putting nominees forward. And he was looking at disc brake wear sensors on tractors. Previous year, Thomas Matthias, again, Colleague Cigar, he won both the student project prizes for a net lifter for round balers. Previous year, again, I think they're probably related. Michael Matthias, same college, on a trailer brake adjustment alarm, and I think certainly Jane Gurney in the audience will be interested to hear that those projects have been taking place, with the need, as Tom said, for care to be taken in road work, and particularly with using trailers. And we know high speed, overloaded, and all of those things don't go together well when you haven't been maintaining the brakes on your vehicles. So some good work there done by students, but what's happened to it? Has it been picked up by the industry? Possibly not. 2016, there wasn't a project which was nominated or suitable for the safety award, sadly. 2015, over in Tralee, Institute of Technology, another one, modulating trailer brake systems, and got the safety award, and then the Johnson New Holland trophy as well for best project. And the first one we had was back in 2015, and that was removing wheels safely from machinery, and that was the overall project award. And the safety project, Jamie Venables at Harper went on a sheep handling device. So the livestock sector has been catered for as well, which is good to see. what have we done to try and help our members? And we established a special interest group. It's one of 12 to enable engineering and technology professionals, academics and students to come together to discuss research and innovation in their sectors. I've got to confess, I don't think we have done that. We haven't encouraged that discussion. We drop pebbles in the pond on Twitter or whatever, but I think that's something we need to tease out in the discussion. But you can see there where the link to the website. But there's 11 other groups that can equally, forestry and horticulture and so on, precision agriculture, plenty of others that have touched on safety or can. So the aim of the group was to promote the principles and share best practice throughout. As I said, we're a broad church, a very wide profession, from involving farmers through the maintenance, design, etc., and really the whole food chain too. We mustn't forget we've members involved in food production side, if you like, the processing side as well. Need to make the industry more aware of the importance of health and safety. Obviously, that's why we're here tonight. But it's about viability and future development, thinking of individuals, sharing the communications and so on, and information that's available. But ultimately, it's about making health and safety and good practice integral to developing careers. It's part of the process. Students used to have to produce, I remember in my day, what really would be called a risk assessment book. So for every project, you had to cover all of those angles before we'd really introduce that concept. We can identify topics and opportunities for members too to make a positive contribution individually or through their businesses or their organisations. It's about creating CPD opportunities too for individuals to develop and identify opportunities. Try to encourage that thinking through the articles, through the quarterly journal there, obviously, updates on the safety partnership, farm safety weeks, both in the journal and social media through our LinkedIn, Twitter channels, conference reports, other health and safety information is available in the members logged in area there. And the institution can also provide a link to specialists if individual members need advice, expert witness, that type of thing, through the Secretariat. And I think we mustn't forget the Land-Based Technicians Accreditation Scheme as well. A lot of IAgrE members are the guys actually going out there onto farms and doing the repairs and maintenance, and they can also act as eyes and ears, and we haven't really exploited that group. So, Charlie, I sort of got to the end of my session by the allotted hour. Hopefully that's been straightforward. If you're happy, I'll bring up the next slide. The way we're going to do this now, we've got a sort of a prompt sheet, which is this next slide. Next steps. What a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities or threats analysis. But I would just make the point before you get into this, Charlie, that photograph at the top, that was taken off a television program. It was one of the 999 or helicopter heroes. That's the team involved trying to get the chap who's trapped in a home roller, traditionally for 90 minutes, to get someone out of one of those. It's something that happens every year. People forget safe stock. They're in the field, they want to get home, they need to clean the mud off, they leave the machine running, try and clean it out manually, and end up getting trapped. And by the time somebody finds them, it's possibly too late. Or if they do, you can guarantee wherever you are in the world, I always see it's about 90 minutes to 2 hours to get you out. That's not a great outcome. And it just beggars belief why we haven't got a system of being able to clean machinery under power. And that's been a bugbear and something I've been pushing, and there must be scope for student projects there, whether it's using hydraulics or water pressure or whatever, to save putting the hands or sticks and getting caught up. So anyway, that's a passion of mine, Charlie. So over to you without stealing your thunder.
Yeah, it's a temptation, isn't it? I mean, working on a farm and living on a farm, and then working in factories, the stark contrast is incredible, really. And you know, I've got plenty of friends who have had some injuries and incidents and all sorts of things over the years on equipment, and it never fails to amaze you what people think is okay still. You know, why you'd want to get entangled in a piece of running equipment, I will never know. But there's a temptation there for people to do it, isn't there? You know,
Yeah.
ram a fork into something, try and unblock something while it's running.
Mm.
And the most basic one that just beggars belief with me is unguarded PTO shafts. I will still never understand why people don't spend a few quid on an expensive piece of machinery to fix the PTO guard, you know. But yeah, it's a difficult one. So I think there's been loads of discussion on the chat, and obviously all that can get recorded. I think I'm not sure what the easiest way to play this is, you know, via Zoom. It probably, when we've done these things in the past, we've tended to just field questions from Zoom, field questions from the chat function on Zoom, and then open up relevant speakers to speak and get their point across and have a discussion, really. At the moment, everybody's still muted, but if anybody wants to shout up on the chat, we can unmute you and go from there. Is Sarah still on?
I am, Charlie, yes. And everybody needs to unmute themselves if they wish to unmute. I can just ask them, but they can undo it themselves.
You want those questions left up there? You've got them to hand, Charlie, so you can use that to promote the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's really just to prompt people, isn't it? But if we use the chat function on Zoom, it's recorded as well.
Yeah.
So I can say, I mean, you know, from a machinery manufacturing perspective, you know, there's an awful lot of work goes in behind the scenes at the machinery manufacturers, tractor manufacturers, to make safe products. And there's certainly been a lot of legislation changes on products in the last 5 years, you know, things on PTO drives. So if you try and get out of a tractor, certainly the new tractors that are coming out this last year, if you try and get out of a tractor with a PTO running, the tractor will stop the PTO unless you've consciously gone in there and told it not to stop the PTO. So obviously tractors get used to drive irrigation pumps and all sorts of things. So you need to have the ability to keep the machine running. But if you've not accepted and told the tractor to keep running, you'll jump out the cab and it'll turn the PTO off on modern tractors. You also get, you know, a lot of automatic park brake facilities these days. So you stick the tractor in neutral, it'll automatically put the park brake on for you. If you get out of the cab, it'll start singing and whistling and blowing alarms at you, and it'll put the park brake on for you. But you know, these things are only available on sort of new modern tractors, and you've still got a fleet of machines out there that are old and don't have this facility. So you are still reliant on the nut on the seat, as we always say, that they must leave the machine safe and put the handbrake on. And it's when you get involved in a lot of failure mode effects and analysis things, and that sort of stuff as a manufacturer, you are so reliant on the operator putting it in neutral and putting the park brake on. And that's the basis for a lot of the FMEAs that designers and manufacturers do. So I'll have a look at the chat. So Tim Viner was asking about stats on the transport fatalities. How many occur in the yard and field and how many occur on the road?
I think Tom will be in a good position to answer that, but you have to remember that HSE statistics don't include what you might call road traffic collisions, unless it's a work-related incident. So, Tom.
Yeah, Alan's right. There is a distinction between incidents which happen on farm and which happen on road. In terms of road accidents, the latest figures are from 2019. and they show that I think there are around about 530 incidents involving agricultural accidents reported to the police involving agricultural vehicles on roads, which resulted in, if I remember right, it's around about 21 fatalities. But what that doesn't do is actually go into more detail and say who was injured. It's just a global figure. I think in terms of farm workplace incidents, in general terms, it's around about 30% of accidents which are related in some way to transport. The mix year from year does vary. So say, for example, this year, there's been 5 incidents where people have been injured in accidents involving ATVs. In a previous year, that was only 1. But there are some commonalities which appear from year to year. So the common things are, in terms of a farm workplace setting, a significant number of people get run over or injured by their own vehicle because they've walked out and gone in front of or gone behind it. And I suppose the other big thing involving farm vehicles is actually pedestrians being run over in a farmyard setting. And there are practical steps that people can take. You know, when it comes to dealing with those sort of things, first of all, it's secure the vehicle when you get out of it. But in terms of run overs of pedestrians, you know, things like wearing high vis, enhanced lighting, or having a pedestrian route marked out will go quite a long way to helping resolve these problems. But I think the thing is that it's all very well, and for large, say for example, larger farmers to put these things into place. It's really trying to get through into the smaller businesses and to get them to try and look at how they can make visitors to the farmyard just more visible, and to make drivers more conscious of the need to look out for people.
And
I think that was something that was, you know, discussed a bit on the chat, really, about, you know, that the sort of statistics of small farms, small family businesses, accident rates compared to large farming businesses. You know, and large farming businesses are more likely to be run like factories, and you know, a lot more sort of professional in terms of the health and safety requirements and training and everything else.
Yeah, I think in general terms, yes, but there have been cases where large farming businesses have really not done what they should have done, and that's resulted in very tragic results. So I think you can make that as a generalization. But I think there's still a need to address all businesses to look at the policies and procedures that they have in place.
could I just pick up as well, Charlie, to talk about the implications as far as road incidents are concerned? When going back to HSE days, the Agriculture Industry Advisory Committee, we had a transport machinery working group there, and we had a presentation from a chap who I think is now retired, but he used to collate reports coming in from the police of road traffic collisions and then allocate them to different categories in terms of type of accident, cause of accident, involving farm vehicles. And the most common cause of fatality was the agricultural tractor, trailer, stroke machine turning right off the highway, and motorcyclists or vehicles thinking they're overtaking, but actually colliding with the vehicle and being killed. And that was all down to lighting and so on. Obviously, we know about some of the dreadful incidents related to inadequate maintenance of brakes on tractors and trailers particularly. And so all of that led to the campaign Safe on Road, Safe Off Road. So if your vehicle is safe for working on the road, as it should be, then ideally and arguably it's safe when it's off-road as well, in terms of braking and lighting and all of the other things that you would expect.
So Richard Gardner has made a good point.
Yeah.
About from Newton Rig, run the yellow wellies each year to the students. But how do we get this information back to parents and employers to understand?
That's a very good question. And again, thinking of my ex-HSE hat, we had I remember our chief inspector being lambasted for having a campaign called "Nag Your Man to Safety." It was getting at the wives, but actually it is about getting the information into the family. Do you know what they're doing out there? And there's conversations I've had with many people. It's not being afraid to question, and that's the key thing. Students at that young age, they might feel intimidated. It's easy for them to slip back into what is traditional practice on the farm because, you know, they're not amongst their peers now. They're working alone with older people who, you know, they've got to go along with it, and it's seen to be pushing the job on, and perhaps that's when risks are taken and when incidents happen. And I think any individual shouldn't do anything that they feel is unsafe, even if you don't need to know the law. You know, it's what you're feeling safe you're doing. If it isn't right, then you should be able to challenge that.
I think there's a certain, you know, you see in some factories using children in health and safety posters. I think is always a good thing, you know, and they talk about, I want my father to come home from work today intact, you know, and use the children there, you know.
Yeah.
It's Tom from the NFU. I think, yeah, it's very difficult to think of a way to try and get through to employers. I think part of it is because there is an imbalance of power. If you've got a young person who's who's employed by a farmer, I mean, there could be all sorts of reasons why they would find it difficult to convince an employer that what they've been asked to do is not the best thing in terms of terms of safety. And I think that's where it comes down to the likes of organisations such as the NFU to actually go out and to really push with our members, with people who employ others, what their duties and responsibilities are, not just because they need to look after their businesses, because they need to look after the people who work for them, who in many ways are, you know, the most valuable resource that they have available to them. So I think there is something which falls very largely on back onto our organisations such as ourselves to promote when trying to deal with that particular question.
Okay, Graham was talking about, picked up a point about older tractors being quickly stopped and started versus modern tractors can sometimes take a bit of getting going in terms of, you know, wake up procedures on screens and things like that. I don't know whether people have got any comments on that. It's an interesting point.
An observation then. When we were discussing the safe stop procedure, a lot of people just wanted to throw it out, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't do all 4 steps. You've got to leave it running for whether it's lighting, computer, you know, rebooting, whatever it might be. And a lot of machines you have to leave running, you know, a sprayer for agitation or machines that stationary, irrigation pumps and so on. So we did talk about a sort of follow-up to safe stop. It's about people getting, it's like wearing a seatbelt. If I move my car on the drive and I don't put my seatbelt on, I feel naked, for a better expression. It doesn't feel right. And you automatically slip. And that's what we want, is for people to go through that process. And as you said, there are technical engineering solutions, but you have to physically override those, mentally override them, more importantly, and then the next step is, okay, I'm getting off the tractor and it's running, but you put the handbrake on, etc., etc. What am I now going to do to work on this machine because it's still going round? You need other measures, and that's what's got to become second nature. And that's the challenge.
So, I mean, an example is that, construction equipment now will not work unless you wear your seatbelt. And in some machines, will not drive forwards. And it's been debated for many, many years on tractors about enforcing seatbelt wearing. And it often gets shied away from, you start and you can't sit in a tractor for 12 hours a day doing field work at 2 miles an hour with a seatbelt on, which is perfectly true. But if you want to go and do 50k down the road, then you should be wearing your seatbelt.
Yeah, I understand from Keith Hawken at the IAgrE. He's obviously going into semi-retirement now, but Mr. International Standards, and did raise this question with him, and I think it will be useful to have an update on where the standards are and where they're going. We haven't had that for a while. It'd be something for the institution to share, I think.
Yeah, There isn't. I mean, the new tractor regulations that came out a couple of years ago. There's a seatbelt provided, and if you're in the tractor, you should wear it. But there's no interlocks in the machine that makes it not work unless you wear your seatbelt. Unlike construction equipment, which is different. But again, it's the manufacturers could do it, but be careful that you alienate all the customers then by making them wear the seatbelt in their tractor, and you've got to have ways to get around it. And I think passive warning is probably the first thing that you're going to see. So it will beep at you until you put your seatbelt on.
Chicken and egg, and on construction sites as well. When you drive up the motorway, you see all these green lights flashing. Well, that's an indicator of they in the seat and got the belt on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's commonplace. That's come from quarry and mining.
Yeah,
and that's commonplace now on building sites. And there's still ramblings because it causes problems, because officially green lights on the road means doctor, but I'm sure people can work out that it's clearly not a doctor driving a telehandler on the building site.
Hello, Charlie. Can you hear me? My name is Brian Rees.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm a farmer and a Lantra instructor, and also I do some work for HSE on accident investigations. And I think we had it mentioned before, somebody mentioned the safety days. I did 18 years along with Steve there, going up and down the country, delivering the shads. Now, I'd like to go back to one point. I'd like to make 2 points, but the first one is Tom mentioned how some farmers can be a little bit pushy when you mention they can't take an under 13-year-old on a tractor. And we used to get a lot of this on the shads, and Steve will support me. Some of them used to get quite aggressive when you told them, because they used to argue the point that, they're safer in the cab than they are on the yard.
Yeah.
So what we developed then, and we used to come up with, we had an answer for everything after 20 years of it. We could answer anything virtually. But what we put together, and it's useful for any instructor or tutor or anything, look at about, say, the last 5 or 6 fatals that have been to children, and find out how they happened and get to know a few details of it and reel those off. And you will guarantee 100% of those kids that are killed are regular riders on machinery. They're either approaching the machine and father doesn't see them and they run over them, or they either get off, like, granddad put a lad off to open the gate and tell him to stand on the other side in a telehandler, and the lad came back and he ran over him with the right-hand front wheel, which we don't tend to talk about, but it is a killer. So all those accidents that we were able to work through, they were all related to children that were riding on the machines regularly. It was never any child running out of the house or coming in off the road or anything. So that was we could shut them up, but we couldn't convince them possibly, but at least we could shut them up. But the other point I would like to make now, we've heard a lot of safe stop going on, and we've had that now for 10, 15 years, isn't it, Alan, really? Something I'm noticing, and I'm hearing it from farmers more and more now over the last couple of years, is the effectiveness of machinery brakes, particularly on some of the telehandlers, hydrostatic systems, where you haven't got much foot brake, unless your engine is started. And plus the fact then, I had an instructor rang me yesterday. I'd had a tractor on a course, and even he had an electronic handbrake, and even that wouldn't engage unless the engine's running. So, and it's caused, I know one fatal that I've been involved in was caused by that. So as well as saying safe stop to people now, I tell them the other strap line is never release your park brake when you get on a tractor or a telehandler until your engine is running. Because until your engine's running, you cannot guarantee you've got an adequate foot brake. And that's, and I think we need to be looking. We've got a few, I've heard of two now, and I'll mention them. There's Fendt and Valtra now. Once you stop the engine on those tractors, the handbrake comes automatically on. You know, and I think we should be looking at that. And it's nice to speak to some engineers, and I'm wondering if something can be done to get that spread through the industry a little bit better.
I think it is. It's a normal thing to not release your handbrake until you've got your engine started, because unless you've got your engine started, you're not really in control of the vehicle.
No, you are.
Because you haven't got steering either, have you? You have got basic steering, but you haven't really got steering.
Yeah, but what it happens, you know, I've been in coroner's hearings, you know, saying, I mean, well, would have this been covered on a course, you know, and when the course was perhaps 10 years ago on a torque converter telehandler, you wouldn't have really talked about the braking system on a hydrostatic, would you? You know,
No.
So it's something we either need to improve the knowledge, getting to the operators on that, or we change the design of the braking systems a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Jane keeps putting her hand up patiently, so fire away, Jane.
Hi, sorry, I can't find the button to wave to you on the machine because I'm on my phone.
No, I couldn't do that.
I do that in my other meetings. It works quite well. Thank you. Yeah. I've just really wanted to touch on that. I think, you know, I'm from a farming family. We've farmed for 9 generations in the same village. So, you know, I see my father out there, my brother, and my father shouts instructions to my brother from the window, you know, and then there's my son outside. And, you know, you've got this 3 generation. That is the problem. And I think with maintenance, people are going behind each other. So everyone knows best. That's the problem on lots of farms. You've got someone who's worked there for many years that is doing it. But with all of these functions that we're talking about, braking and so forth, the most important thing is your equipment well maintained? And until we get that message to the farmer, so we can talk ourselves blue in the face, being really nice to farmers, but there really is not a need. They're blunt speaking, and you know the way to go for it is to bluntly speak about it. I hear the handbrake. Oh, you can't stop your tractor, and I don't want to muck up my really expensive tractor, and I'm this and I'm that. But you ask them to maintain the flipping thing, and they're not interested. So that, you know, on one hand, they're watching the pennies, and a lot of them are really, really cautious, and they do adopt the good practice. And I'm sure, you know, we're members of the Farm Safety Partnership, and they do listen. But we're spending a lot of time going softly up behind them, and there isn't time, because every single death affects a whole family and a whole community. And absolutely, we've got to stop saying, well, let's not be so hard on, let's not do this. They just need a clear message. I don't know if Maria Budlip's still on here. I was talking to her earlier, and she's joined the meeting because she saw that I was coming on. You know, we were talking about the fact there isn't another industry that if there was an incident on a road, that you would ask that person, that HGV driver or that car driver, if they could pop along and clear their own mess up, and then you thanked them on Twitter for doing it. And you know, if you've got an incident, farmers have got to understand their responsibility, whether they're on the road or whether they're on the farm, is theirs, and they've got to act correctly. You're an operator driving a trailer. You're pushed into a traction trailer. You're pushed into not highlighting something that is concerning you. And you kill someone, then you're going to be the one that they're going to be prosecuting for manslaughter, and they just don't understand. And I was saying to Alan, I've got a little you know, a little thing that I use. People say to me about, oh, MOT on trailer or not. And I think if you went 2 miles down the road and there was a gate closed, it said MOT on it, most farmers would shunt up and go round the long way because they don't need an MOT, they're fine. But if they actually opened the gate or stood on the gate, they could see the pure 98 regulations 8 more miles down the road. That's where they're supposed to be. But they're so blinkered that they shouldn't proceed because they don't need to. And they don't need to conform. That I find it absolutely infuriating that they have the stupidest thing said to you. So, I mean, the whole thing it just enrages me because everyone is so careful what they say to them. And I know Tom's really, really good with them and works them round really well, especially on these farm talks. But I do think that we need to particularly go for the harder kill on. This is going to cost you this much money if you have caused an incident or you've killed someone. This is going to be the cost to you. You can't afford to ignore your safety. So I do think that we do need to be we need to be tough love with them really in order to save them from themselves. That's all I've got to say. I'll put myself on mute.
No, very, very good point there. I mean, MOTs have been debated for years, haven't they, on tractors? But yeah, I think a blunt message can sometimes be the right one, can't it? Okay, so lots of stuff on the chat. So yeah, we're talking about seatbelts on there again, overriding them. It's there is, in terms of technology, all sorts of things can be done, but you're still reliant on people. Okay. So just turning to the slide that we originally had up, about where do you get your information from in terms of the college lecturers, what information and guidance and support do you need? What can we provide? We haven't seen any questions on that yet. So I don't know if everybody has any things to say on that.
While people perhaps are thinking about it and sticking their head above the parapet, I was thinking, Charlie, maybe what the institution could do is just a series of fairly brief polls, to brief surveys, survey monkey type surveys with a few structured questions, rather like these points at the end, using this audience and the wider membership of the institution as well, to tease out ideas. I keep coming back to my premise. It's about giving lecturers, if not the students, ideas. There's so many things we've talked about tonight. When we've had discussions in the safety partnership about safe stop, one organisation had been known to everybody, G's, up on the Fens. They went straight back, sat down, had a working group. Right, what can we do about this? They've got machines working in the field with dozens and dozens of workers on them, obviously, mobile pack houses in effect, the harvesters. And they got around it just by simply providing additional battery power on the machine. So even when it was switched off, anything that required electrical power, it was still running. So you didn't switch it, it's just simple technology like that, which can be developed. They dealt with that in-house with their own engineers. So there's lots of good ideas out there, but we need to find ways to share them.
Okay. So I think we're getting near past. Whether anybody else wants to add. So
I was just going to put. I'm going to put Graham Higginson on the spot now. We had some discussions leading up to this. I don't know if he's still there. I haven't looked lately. And Graham wearing his Association of Lecturers in Agriculture Machinery hat. I know you've recently had a meeting, Graham, and we organised this evening's meeting to try and hit the majority. I think we need to find ways how we can communicate what comes out of this evening session, how we roll that out to students next, and how we share the information. But Graham, what's your thoughts on proceedings this evening?
Yeah, it's been a healthy debate, and I think certainly we can, through ALAM, we can invite the people in again from the student body. And I think, I know when day one, week one with AgMech at Harper, we show the 1980 something, whatever it is, with John Humphreys and the gory video of people being trapped in the Tatey harvester, etc. And that works for some and not others. So other people want the short, sharp, shock tactic. Others need to see the business benefit of it. But certainly, I think we get people coming back from placement who have got ideas for improving systems for safety, etc. One of which I put in for the student award this last year, so hopefully I'll get to hear about that before too long. But that was trying to mechanize a system rather than relying on brute force and damaging your back kind of labor. But yeah, as people have said, it's what happens at college doesn't always translate to what happens back at home on farm. So certainly bring students in, brilliant.
Okay.
I was going to say, sorry, for me as well. I mean, we had a sort of a pre-discussion, and Sarah, came up with the idea of like lesson plans, or HSE used to produce guidance for students, and lecturers use that as a curriculum, really. Trouble is, lectures now, you've got less time. It takes you days to prepare for a short lecture these days, with it being online. But if there's any help that between us we can share examples, good practice is what we need to use our specialist group for, to encourage that debate and discussion that I mentioned, and we need to raise awareness that that exists.
Yeah, and certainly we can distribute that throughout ALAM. It's not a problem.
Okay, so we're probably about done, aren't we? It's gone half past.
Yeah.
So I mean, if well, thank you for everybody for attending this evening after a hard day's work. Always difficult, but I think there's been some really good debate. It's all been recorded, so we've captured that, and we'll make sure we've captured the chat as well that's been going on, because there's been lots and lots of chat going on while people have been presenting. Almost impossible to keep up with it while we're talking as well. So we'll capture that and work through it. So again, thanks for giving up your time. I don't know whether you've got something to say, Alan.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that. There's several individuals on here. Amy Irwin with the NTS Ag tag, and Sally Ann had to leave earlier. She's a lecturer in law at Staff Uni, but she's doing a PhD through Harper. Emily Jones, as part of her degree, she had a placement with a safety consultancy company, and is enthused about the topic, and her thesis is going to be looking at this as well. And I think that's why I wanted them to join in tonight. There's a lot of resources out there and a lot of points of view. It's good that we've got these people actually doing some research that's been carried out in Ireland as well, how to communicate effectively with farmers through discussion groups and so on. So I see this as a start of the process. I said, our objective tonight was to rejuvenate what we've got as an institution. We need to work with others, members and non-members. It's start the process, and hopefully we can have a series of these events, perhaps presentations from AEA or from Jane on the Tilly process, or a whole load of subsequent presentations. You've already got a good program of lunchtime lectures, but maybe we can have evening lectures for safety or something. It's something I'd love to help you push.
Okay.
So, and thank you, Tom, too, for helping out.
Okay, then. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much.